Hi everyone, welcome to another Yarn Scrap Friday, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make this actual flower here. But what we're going to be doing is something a little bit different because I want you to, well, you don't have to, but I am trying to inspire you to try using different hook sizes and crocheting into different areas of a pattern to create different effects. But I'm going to show you how to make this exact flower. But as you can see here, this is a flower used by just using a different hook size and by working into some different stitches, but to create the same effect. But for this particular flower here, I used a 4.5mm crochet hook, and I just used some cotton yarn, and I think this is just a DK weight, light worsted weight cotton yarn. It might be slightly thinner, and I chose two colours, but really you can use any yarn weight that you like, any yarn that you like, any hook size that you like, and then hopefully you can have fun experimenting by working into different areas of the stitch to create different effects. Okay, so let's show you how to make this one first. Let's begin. So the first thing to do is to take your white, and we're going to chain 4. So it's chain 4. Okay. Let's chain 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you need to put your hook in the first chain. So find your first chain, and then do a slip stitch. So bring the yarn through that first chain. Then put it straight through the loop on your hook to do a slip stitch, and that creates a loop of your chains joined at the beginning and the end, and in the middle is a hole, not to be confused with that first chain because it'll be quite big, and into that hole there we need to work 10 double crochet. And it's in US terminology, so we're going to yarn over and then putting your hook into that center hole there. Bring the yarn through the center, and then wrapping it round your chains, we're going to do a double crochet. And we want 10 of these, so there's 1, back into the center, 2, back into the center, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and one more, 10. You can see I'm only using a scrap bit of yarn here because it's cut at the end. And then what we want to do is pull your tail end to bring that center hole in a bit, and then finding your first double crochet, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we want to do a slip stitch. We're just going to put our hook in that first double crochet, make sure it goes under both of those little bits of yarn. And then instead of yarning over with the white, we're going to bring in our colour. So I'm just going to put that over our hook, hold it with my finger, and then bring that through that first double crochet, then straight through the loop on your hook to do a slip stitch. Just pull your tail ends, just make sure it's nice and tight and doesn't come undone like it almost did then. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work the petals, and normally, if I bring my hook out, normally we would work into that top stitch just going under those 2 bits of yarn, but what we actually want to do is we want to work the stitches into the gap underneath. So the first thing to do is we're going to do a little slip stitch in our first gap. So find your next stitch, and then underneath that, in the gap in between those double crochets, we want to put our hook in that gap, so not for the stitch, in the gap underneath. I'm just going to do a little slip stitch just to secure our yarn into place so it's not too loose. Okay, so just do a little slip stitch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to chain 2. 1 and 2. We're going to chain 2 at the beginning of every petal. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work 3 treble crochet stitches into that same gap. And to do a treble, we yarn over twice, wrap the yarn around your hook twice, put your hook into the big gap, bring the yarn through, and you'll have 4 loops. And when working stitches that are double crochet or bigger in US terminology, we always pull through 2 loops until we end up with just the 1. So we yarn over, pull through 2, got 3 loops left, yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, got 2 left, yarn over, pull for the last 2, and that completes the treble. We want 3 of those, so yarn over twice again, go into the same gap, bring the yarn through, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2 for another treble, and 1 more, yarn over twice, go into the same gap, bring the yarn through, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, and you've got 3 trebles. Then finding the next gap, so there's our next stitch, but we want to go into the next gap underneath, and into that next gap we want to do 3 trebles again. So yarn over twice, go into the next gap and do 3 trebles. So there's 1, yarn over twice, go into the same gap for another treble, 2, yarn over twice, go into the same gap for your 3rd treble. And then to finish off our first petal, we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to slip stitch into that same gap we did our trebles. So just do a little slip stitch in there. And that completes our first petal. So what we want to do now is find the next gap and do a little slip stitch just to move our work over. A little slip stitch there. Same again, we're going to chain 2 at the beginning, 1, 2, then 3 trebles in the same gap we just slip stitched into. 3 trebles. So 1, back into the same gap, 2, 3. 3 trebles, all in that same space. Then find the next gap, the next chain space, there's our stitch, there's the gap underneath, and do 3 trebles in there. So there's the gap in between those double crochet posts. Wrapping it round the top stitch, do 3 trebles. 1, 2, 3. And then to finish up our petal, we chain 2, so we always chain 2 at the beginning and the end, chain 2, slip stitch into the same gap with the trebles, slip stitch in there, and then we slip stitch in the next gap to begin our next petal. So you want to repeat this round back to the beginning. So we slip stitch in the next gap, chain 2, 1, 2, then 3 trebles in the same gap we just slip stitched into. 3 trebles in there. 1, 2, 3. Then find the next gap, 3 trebles. 1, 2, 3, and then finish up with a chain 2, 1 and 2, and then slip stitch into the same space as the trebles. Slip stitch, and then we slip stitch in the next gap to begin our next petal. slip stitch in the next gap, chain 2, 1, 2, 3 trebles in the same gap we just done the slip stitch. 1, my yarns will get twisted, 2, 3, and then in the next gap 3 trebles, 1, 2, 3, then we chain 2, 1, 2, slip stitch in the same gap with the trebles. Okay, and then we're on to our last petal, so you want to slip stitch in the next gap over, chain 2, 3 trebles in the same gap as the slip stitch, 3 trebles in there, 1, 'Getting dark, running out of time, 2, 3. Then you should have sort of run out of gaps, because what we want to do is just pull your tail ends tight. What you want to do now is to find, there was the first gap we worked into there, and just to the right of it you should see another gap. So if you find your last double crochet post, and just next to that will be your last gap. You move those tail ends out of the way, you might see it better. Tuck those up. So there we go, there's our gap. It's just to the right of the first one we worked into and just to the left of that last double crochet post. And you want to include, there's a bit of white stitching there as well, you want to include that into this double crochet post. So what we're going to do is yarn over twice for our 3 trebles, find that double crochet post and the bit of stitching there, and go to the left of that into there, okay, and do your 3 trebles. There's a reason for that, it just makes it neater at the end. So 1, back into that same gap, 2, and 3. Then what we need to do is to chain 2, 1 and 2, then just slip stitch into the same space. My petals are getting in the way. There we go. Then just cut your yarn, do your slip stitch, cut your yarn. I've been working with some scrap, and then just bring it up like that. And there we go. Because we incorporated that extra bit of stitching in that last post, it creates a nice neat finish for our little sort of pinwheel shape. So all we need to do now is to thread our tail end onto our yarn needle, cut your yarn if you have to, and then we're just going to sew to the back. It doesn't really matter where you sew, just make sure it's neat, and sew to the back. Okay, and you may choose to tie in your tail ends, sew them in, or you may want to keep them for tying onto a project. But there we go, there's our finished flower. I hope you managed to follow along, and just by working into the space below the stitch, it creates a different effect, and just by using a bigger hook size, it creates a bigger flower. But we've used exactly the same yarn as this little flower, so you can see the difference in the flower. With this flower, it's using exactly the same yarn, but I used a smaller hook. I used a 2.5, and instead of working into the gap, I worked into the top stitch as normal. It creates much more circle effect there. But this is exactly the same pattern. I just worked with a smaller hook and worked into the top stitch. So you can see the difference with working with a bigger hook, a 4.5. Working with a bigger hook and working into the gaps instead creates a different effect. I put my hand over it, it creates a different effect in the middle than it does here. So have fun playing with different hook sizes and different techniques, working into different spaces to create different effects. And if you want to, you could do 2 different colours and then put them on top of each other. So like I said, just for this flower I just used a 2.5mm hook and worked into the top stitches as normal. I didn't work into the gaps, and that's all exactly the same otherwise. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Hope you managed to follow along, and I'm running out of light, so I shall say goodbye and see you soon for some more crochet fun. Just watching, guys. Bye.